This is Otto and the story of the disappearance of the waves from the beach. Hello, I'm John and this is the next fantastical story of Otto and his friend Simon the Shoes. Let me set the scene for you. As many as 15 Christmas days had passed and winter had become spring and then summer and autumn for all of those 15 years, for all of that time. However, Otto von Grotto, the unique wooden toy soldier, was now standing on the shelf in the front bedroom of the home of David, the boy who was now a young man, that Otto had always stood on guard for, from his return from Wasp Island. The house in question was no longer number 17, Cherry Tree Drive, and just as he had done all those years before, Otto found himself considering his potential future, without his friends that were still at his former home, with all of the other Christmas decorations. Otto was now the guardian of another child, David's daughter, Elizabeth, who loved him with all of her father's devotion. As a static wooden toy soldier, he had never aged the same way that his human custodians had, but he did bear the scars of being played with by successive generations of children, all of whom loved him, and his paint was chipped off in places and worn bare in others. However, Otto was proud of his worn and chipped paint and saw these as his badges of honour. It was because of his longevity in this world and particularly this household that Otto was convinced that this was his destiny, and he was happy with this outcome. However, Otto had not seen the tall man outside his window, and he was once again surprised to find himself in the outstretched hand of Simon the Shoes, who, as before, had selected him for a very specific task that Simon believed was one that only Otto could accomplish. Simon was, of course, still wearing his shoes that looked like, and actually were, Cornish pasties. Otto was aware that he was slowly becoming a small human being once again, a sensation he believed he would never experience once more. There was suddenly a thundering, rumbling sound that made both Simon and Otto jump. The strange noise was actually Otto's tummy rumbling. His excuse was he hadn't eaten anything for 15 years, and at that point, both Simon and Otto broke into laughter. Welcome back, my friend. I hope you're ready to help me just once again with your unique skills and military training. Otto simply nodded his head and replied, Yes, of course, Simon, but how can it be possible that only I can help you? There must be thousands of toy soldiers in the world who look identical to me, and yet you've returned to collect me once again. Simon said absolutely nothing in reply, and as before, with no explanation, they were back on the island. But this time Simon had remained with Otto upon their arrival. The welcoming committee of parrots was in attendance, and they seemed delighted to see Otto again. Otto was enjoying an early breakfast in Simon's beautiful cave on the beach on his island home when he realised he could not hear the crash of the waves on the beach. The ocean was as flat as a mirror, and it looked as though it was simply not moving at all. Simon was outside on the beach, and he was standing there watching the sun rise on a desolate patch of static water, without as much as a ripple for as far as the eye could see. This is the problem I'm asking you to solve for all of us, young soldier. The oceans of my world have ceased to ebb and flow, and the waves that were continually controlled by the same moon that manages the tidal patterns of your planet Earth. My hope is that between us we can restore this planet's tidal forces at the same time preserve the same forces on Earth before they are also lost. Given that Otto was now 90 years old, the term young soldier amused him, and he replied, Of course I will do anything that I can do, Simon. But as you know, I'm still a wooden peg of a toy for all my brief time as a human being, thanks to you. I'm sure you have a plan that will make everything work again. The only plan I have, young Otto, is that when we get to the bottom of this mystery, and find a solution that will solve the problems to our parallel universes, you will be a major factor. This was now the only way to solve the mystery turned out to be that Simon explained that to Otto that while planet Earth was a sphere and rotated around the sun, Simon's planet was actually a flat disk with a gently upturned rim that kept the oceans from spilling over the edges and disappearing forever. At the centre of the dish was a gigantic hole that also had a deep rim round it, and it allowed those who knew how to enter and get inside and underneath the surface of the flat disk to view the celestial mechanism that existed between the two worlds, and the way to our planet Earth was formed from this hole in the centre of Simon's planet. Simon had been taught by his mother, a wise woman, how to navigate the path between the two worlds and how to travel across them without being seen by others. It was this hole that Simon was now trying to use to find a way to restore the movement of the waves. Otto was amazed to find the inside of the void was actually a gigantic clock movement that was constantly rotating at an axis of the spinning disc. There was an array of gears and pinion wheels that were moving around at different speeds. It was when he started to look more closely, Otto noticed that one of the wheels was spinning in a direction entirely opposite to all of the others. "Excuse me, Simon, but does that wheel normally spin in the opposite direction?" Simon moved over to where Otto was standing up at the huge dark void and held the whole mechanism inside of it, and then declared he was surprised by Otto's discovery. "No, Otto, all of the wheels and the gears are supposed to spin in the same direction, and I believe you might have discovered the problem. Now, how do we do anything to fix it without doing more damage or stopping it altogether?" Again, Otto was perplexed when Simon suggested that he, Otto, could walk out over the static water and then check something out for Simon. "How am I supposed to walk on the ocean without sinking?" Simon replied, "Oh, that's the easy part, young soldier. You can just borrow a pair of my shoes." Otto was further confused because of the size of his feet and then Simon's huge shoes. Simon smiled and said he was just going to have to take his word for it. After he'd removed his own boots, Otto selected a pair of shoes, all of which were made from Cornish pasties, and they were indeed significantly too big for him. However, as he put them on his feet, they shrank to exactly the same size as Otto's feet. Simon laughed, and he looked at Otto's face and said to him, "Remember, I did explain to you that my mother was a wise woman who could do magical things to anything and everything. Now you see how clever she was." Otto walked around in his new footwear and asked how this would help him walk across the water. Simon stepped out onto the ocean, happily walked away from the hole in the centre of the flat dish planet. Otto was sceptical, but he took a tentative step onto the surface and miraculously found himself walking on the surface of the ocean. Once he'd gathered his confidence in his ability to walk on a surface that should actually cause him to sink, Otto began to think the problem of the stationary water. As night fell, Otto began to observe the stars in the sky, began to realise that they were in exactly the same place as they were when he had arrived on the night before. Otto was about to ask Simon if they were normally stationary or if they should be moving, and that the sky should look different to the way it was when Otto had arrived. However, when he turned round, Simon was looking at the same spot in the sky, and he actually said to Otto, "Those stars are supposed to be moving around, and they are not." Otto replied, "Well, we've isolated the problem, Simon. Now all we need to do is find a way to fix it." Simon looked at Otto and said, "Once again, my fine friend, I remember why I chose you, and I called upon your courage and intelligence to help me with this difficult situation." Otto smiled and then said, Is there any chance of a few minutes sleep before we analyse this situation and decide what to do for the best outcome for both our worlds? Simon picked Otto up and carried him back to his cave, and by the time they were there, Simon noticed that Otto was asleep and gently snoring in his arms. When he woke up, Otto found himself still pondering on the mystery of the wheel that appeared to be the problem behind the disappearance of the tides on Simon's planet. Simon and Otto returned to the gigantic hole in the centre of the flat planet, where Simon lowered Otto down into the chamber where he believed the problem was located. As he looked up at the huge brass wheel and his eyes became acclimatised to the semi-darkness of the chamber, he became aware of something, or someone else, that was also in the chamber, watching him. Moving slowly and carefully towards him was a small group of dwarves, each armed with a small spanner or a screwdriver. The leader of the group was carrying a diminutive oil can and small oily cloth. Otto stood perfectly still and said absolutely nothing to upset the group, because even though they were dwarves, they were still considerably bigger than Otto. The leader finally spoke to Otto and asked him to explain why he was inside the chamber, because it was a sacred place where only certain individuals were supposed to be. Otto answered, "I am Otto, and I am here at the request of Simon the Shoes. I imagine you know Simon, or at least have heard of him, and he asked me to come to discover the problem, if there is a problem, and why the waves are not crashing on the beach of the planet that is above us all." Upon hearing the mention of Simon's name, the group seemed to relax, and their leader put down his oil can, and after wiping his hands on the small oily cloth, he went to shake hands with Otto. Anyone who is a friend of Simon's must be a very trustworthy person, and we welcome you to our home and place of work. I am Pinion, and these are my brothers, Cog, Ratchet, Coilspring, and Scape. He's actually called Escapement, but we just call him Scape for short. Since the first day that the maker of the movement that you see around you, it has never, ever caused any problems or failed to function properly, and we are at a loss for how to fix it. Otto called up to Simon to ask him if he wanted to come down, and Simon replied, "To be honest, young Otto, it's a bit of a tight squeeze in that chamber for me at the best of times. I think it's best I just stay up here. Tell me what you need to get to fix the problem." Otto called back to Simon and said he could use a ladder to help him get up to the now static wheel that had previously been turning in the opposite direction. The group of dwarves stepped forward, and Pinion said he couldn't reach the height of the static wheel, and that nobody had ever been up that high since the movement was first constructed. Simon suggested he could lower a rope ladder from the side of his boat, and that whoever was going to try and fix the problem could do so from above rather than below. All the dwarves looked worried about this idea, and Pinion explained they'd never been outside the chamber, and he said they were not sure if they're going to be able to get a rope ladder of that height. Otto called to Simon and said, "Would you be able to lower me down to the problem wheel with your rope ladder if we attempt to reach it from above rather than below?" Simon simply lowered a length of rope down to Otto, who quickly grasped it and allowed Simon to pull him up to the rim of the hole, where he could explain his idea to Simon and the possible problem, and therefore the possible answer to the stuck wheel. When Simon was fully aware of the situation, he understood how Otto intended to handle it. Otto said, "Basically, Simon, I need to get on top of the stationary wheel and remove whatever is jamming it and hope that it will be free to rotate again properly." Simon was very worried, particularly about the risks involved in Otto's plan. But he could not see any other option, and he said he would have to make sure that Otto was safe from the possibility that he could be trapped by the spinning wheel at the moment that it was freed. Otto smiled at Simon and said, "You trusted me with your plan to get rid of the wasps on your island. And all I'm asking is that with your help, you will trust me with this plan to release the wheel. Then we can restart the rotation of your planet and the waves will move again, as they should. Simon was still not entirely happy, but he could see no other option but to find the best way to make Otto's plan work. In short, Otto intended to reach down from above and get above the wheel, with Simon holding his weight while he removed the blockage, whatever it might be. As they measured out the length of rope to exactly the height from the wheel to the edge of the rim, Otto suddenly realised he recognised what was causing the problem. "Simon, I know what it is, and I know exactly how to fix it, but I have to get on top of that jammed wheel and to dislodge it, and whatever is in there will then release the mechanism and hopefully restore everything back to normal." As Simon gently lowered Otto into the centre of the mechanical system that made Simon's flat world, he looked down and saw that Otto was just about ready to try and release the jammed wheel. Suddenly, there was a sharp metallic crack and the whole planet shook. The waves began to move on the beach as they were supposed to always move. Simon raised the rope quickly and as quickly as he could to the relief of both of them. Simon got Otto back into his boat. Simon and Otto sat in the boat for a while, and then Simon asked Otto what the object was. Otto opened his hand and showed Simon a small but perfectly formed obsidian and gold wasp that was so hard it could not even be broken by the mechanism that could cause a whole planet to rotate on its axis. It's one of the wasps that was blown out of the volcano in our first adventure. It must have been flung out so fast that it fell through the hole in the centre of your world and then fell into the mechanism that spins your world. And over these 15 years, it must have finally arrived at this point in your mechanism. And this is where it's become wedged between the wheel and the pinion of the next wheel and jammed them together. Simon was amazed by Otto's discovery and his incredible ability to make a difficult problem seem so easy to solve. Otto were both shocked out of their thoughts when they heard voices from within the mechanism, as Pinion and his crew wanted to know what was happening. Was Otto going to be all right after the sudden shock of the restart that Otto had just created? "Well, that appears to have worked then," said Pinion, and asked Otto if he knew what the problem had been. Otto explained that a foreign object had become wedged in the mechanism and there was little chance of it happening again unless something else happened to emit debris into the hole into the chamber. Well, it certainly never happened before, and I hope it never happens again, because it's been chaos down here for quite a while. It's caused a lot of damage elsewhere. Otto now began to feel guilty for causing the problem, and he looked at Simon, who was immediately aware that his friend was worrying about something he had absolutely no control over. Simon called down to Pinion and said, "Young Master Pinion, do you recognise my voice? Do you believe I would only tell you the truth?" There was a little trembling in Pinion's voice when he replied, "Yes, of course, Mr. Simon. I wasn't trying to make trouble, but we need some help down here with the mechanism to make sure it's not permanently damaged or a risk of it stopping completely forever." Simon looked down through the hole and smiled at Pinion and said, "My friend Otto has been a great help to me twice, and he's very concerned with the idea that you think that any of this damage would be his fault." Pinion gasped and said, "Oh my goodness, no, it's not about blaming anyone for anything. I just need to confirm the mechanism is not broken." Otto breathed a sigh of relief that was strong enough to cause Simon's boat to gently rock from side to side, and Simon looked back up from the edge of the hole and smiled at Otto. "Don't you worry about mechanism maintenance, because it's in good condition and as sturdy as the day the Creator built it. Once again, I have to ask you if you want to stay here with us, or would you rather return to your sentry duties on your own spherical planet?" As before, Otto was torn by his choices. He had been offered, but in the end, he knew that standing guard over David when he was a young boy, and then David's daughter Elizabeth, was his true destiny. As he was contemplating his future once again, he found himself in Elizabeth's bedroom, and as before, he was a simple wooden toy soldier with chipped and worn paint. He heard Elizabeth call to her father that she had found Otto under the blanket box that her grandmother had given her. "Daddy, I don't know what happened, but I think Otto must have fallen off his shelf and then rolled under Grandma's Ottoman wooden box. I found him. He had this strange ornament. It looks like a little bee or a wasp, wedged between his body and one of his arms. I'm sure it wasn't there before." David came up to his daughter's bedroom and examined the wasp with a look of surprise on his face. "When I was a boy, I lost Otto, then found him in exactly the same way that you had done, and again he had a tiny wasp with him then. I believe your grandmother still has it, on the windowsill of my old bedroom in 17 Cherry Tree Drive. And we don't know where that one came from, but I'm so glad you found Otto again." Otto was gently placed back on his feet, in his sentry position, on the shelf by the window. His latest adventure was again just as much a mystery to David and his family, but at least he knows that you know about it, and that is enough for him.